How did Jesus answer false accusations? Why did they release an insurrectionist instead of Jesus? What time was the crucifixion? Who else was crucified with Jesus? Did people mock Jesus? Did Jesus quote a psalm on the cross? After about 6 hours on the cross, when did Jesus die? What happened to the veil in the temple? Who did they compel to carry Jesus' cross? Do we carry our cross? Let's discuss Mark 15. Where was Jesus taken next? How did he answer Pilate? As soon as it was morning, the high priests convened a meeting with the elders and scribes and the whole council. They bound Jesus with chains, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "You say so." Did Jesus answer false accusations? Are there times when we might wisely follow his example here? And the chief priests accused him of many things, but he answered nothing. And Pilate asked him again, saying, "Do you answer nothing? Behold how many things they witness against you." But Jesus yet answered nothing, so that Pilate marveled. Why do they release an insurrectionist instead of Jesus? Now at the feast he used to release for them any one prisoner whom they requested. And the man named Barabbas had been imprisoned with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the insurrection. And the crowd went up and began asking him to do as he'd been accustomed to do for them. And Pilate answered them, saying, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he was aware that the chief priests had delivered him over because of envy. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to ask him to release Barabbas for them instead. Did Pilate make the cowardly decision or the right one? And responding again, Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with him whom you call the King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Crucify him." But Pilate said to them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." Intent on satisfying the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas for them, and after having Jesus flogged, he handed him over to be crucified. Did the soldiers then proceed to mock Jesus and abuse him? The soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is, the praetorium, and called together the whole company of soldiers. They put a robe on him, then twisted together a crown of thorns, and set it on him. And they began to call out to him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Again and again they struck him on the head with a staff and spit on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him. And when they'd mocked him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. Who did they compel to carry Jesus' cross? What was his name? Then they compelled a certain man, Simon, a Cyrenian, the father of Alexander and Rufus, as he was coming out of the country and passing by, to bear his cross. Where did they crucify Jesus? Was it outside the gate? And they brought Jesus to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. A strong sour wine mixed with bitter herbs was meant to numb those suffering on a cross. Did Jesus refuse to lessen his suffering? They offered him wine mixed with myrrh to drink, but he didn't take it. What did they do with his clothes as they crucified Jesus? They crucified him. They divided up his clothes, drawing lots for them to determine who would take what. What time was the crucifixion? What did a sign say? Who else was crucified with Jesus? It was about 9 o'clock in the morning when they nailed him to the cross. On it was a sign that told why he was nailed there. It read, "This is the King of the Jews." The soldiers also nailed 2 criminals on crosses, one to the right of Jesus and the other to his left. Did people mock Jesus mercilessly while he suffered on the cross? And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, "Aha! You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." So also the chief priests with the scribes mocked him to one another, saying, "He saved others, but he cannot save himself. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also reviled him. Did Jesus quote the Psalms on the cross? Is it possible that God the Father turned his back on Jesus temporarily because Jesus at that moment took on the sins of the whole world? When it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And at 3, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which is translated, my God, why have you forsaken me?" So Jesus was on the cross from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. when he died. This is the time when the Passover lambs began being killed. Were people still mocking him? When some of the people standing there heard this, they said, "Listen, he's calling for Elijah." So someone ran and soaked a sponge in some sour wine. Then he put it on a stick and offered Jesus a drink, saying, "Wait, let's see if Elijah comes to take him down." Then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last. Was the tearing of the veil obviously from a divine source? If torn from bottom to top, could people have claimed that a man did it? Did this symbolize that the way to the heavenly Holy of Holies was now open? And the veil of the temple was rent in 2, from the top to the bottom. What did the Roman centurion, who was standing right there, say? And when the centurion, who was standing right in front of him, saw the way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly this man was God's Son." What did some of the women do who were watching from a distance? Now there were also some women watching from a distance, among whom were Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James the Less and Joses, and Salome. When he was in Galilee, they used to follow him and serve him. And there were many other women who came up with him to Jerusalem. How was Jesus buried? Who was Joseph of Arimathea? It was preparation day, that is, the day before the Sabbath. So as evening approached, Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent member of the council, who was himself waiting for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Pilate was surprised to hear that he was already dead. Summoning the centurion, he asked him if Jesus had already died. When he learned from the centurion that it was so, he gave the body to Joseph. So Joseph bought some linen cloth, took down the body, wrapped it in linen, and placed it in a tomb cut out of rock. Then he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Joseph saw where he was laid. How did Jesus answer false accusations? Why did they release an insurrectionist instead of Jesus? What time was the crucifixion? Who else was crucified with Jesus? Did people mock Jesus? Did Jesus quote a psalm on the cross? After about 6 hours on the cross, when did Jesus die? What happened to the veil in the temple? Who did they compel to carry Jesus' cross? Do we carry our cross? You decide.